Hello and welcome to Unacademy. If I ask you when did iron technology develop for the first time, the argument which you're going to give me is a Eurocentric one, which is Anatolia. However, we have new evidence coming out of India and from Tamil Nadu, which argues that iron was smelted for the first time and artifacts were created in the 3rd millennium BC in India for the first time, that too in Tamil Nadu. Before we talk about Sivagalai, which is now changing the landscape, and in the Kilizi video, I actually talked about how this site needs a separate video and its own space within the larger space of our timeline. We will discuss it in detail. Let's first talk about the 99.99 offer, which is going to end today. And it is a very important opportunity for you to join the Unacademy family. Use the code IAS English to get attributed to our team. If you need any knowledge, anything related to history, if you don't want to miss these type of sessions, please do subscribe to this Telegram channel. Now, if you go into Eurocentric knowledge, even if you today type in Google, which is the oldest iron technology site or which is the oldest iron age site, it will give you reference to this empire, which is called the Hittite Empire in the Anatolian sector, which is modern day Turkey. And the argument which Eurocentric historians would give or European historiography will give you is that based on the use of iron, based on the volume of artifacts, and based on whatever we know of iron technology, in and around 1380 BCE, iron was being used, developed, and smelted in very high volumes in this sector. Now, just to give you a reference of 1380 BC, 1380 BC would fall in Indian history between the 1500 to the 1000 BCE period, which is basically your Vedic period. And in Indian history also, the iron technology concept is linked to Vedic period. Though we have enough evidence coming out of the megalithic sector from South India, which was already pushed to 2000 BC, which is 2nd millennium, 3rd millennium BCE, that there are sites which are yielding iron. Though traditionalist knowledge in any standard book, you will find this concept that 1500 to 1000 BC, which is the Vedic period. Within that later Vedic period is when iron technology properly started to be used and the volume of artifacts is very high. Now this, which is the idea that Vedic age in Indian history and in world history or in world context, it is the Hittite Empire, which basically are two references to iron technology across the world. Oldest and in the Indian context, the contemporary to Peninsula sector civilizations. Vedic age and Hittite Empire are iron technology based pioneers from where this knowledge disseminated. I have argued in multiple spaces and even in class that megalithic actually breaks this concept of this 1, 2, 3 step, which is Neolithic, Chalcolithic, iron, which is you have to go from stone to the concept of copper to then into iron, because in multiple megalithic sites in South India, we see that they straight away go from Neolithic to iron. However, there was not enough evidence for that. However, now that is not true. From a small village in Tamil Nadu, Sivagalai, and other sites which are also yielding similar. But this is the, you can say, the most important site, because potsherds and a pot has yielded some evidence, which I'm going to talk about, which has totally changed the whole concept. 84 artifacts have been yielded out of this site, which is now changing the whole timeline itself. And this argument that iron was for the first time developed in the Anatolian sector, then it was taken by the Aryans, and that through then it came from an Aryan based understanding, and it was the Vedic civilization which made iron a standard protocol, and that technology then disseminated towards the Peninsula sector. This is traditional knowledge. This is what you will find in standard areas. It will say IVC is a Bronze Age civilization, Chalcolithic civilization. Then they will say Vedic civilization is iron. Megalithic may or may not be iron, but has iron evidences. And it is the Vedic civilization based spread of iron, which in turn leads to Magad becoming very important. And Kilidi has already destroyed this notion that Magad would be the first urban concept, or the Mahajanpada, the first, second urbanization in that regard. They in their own right are now turning out to be the first urbanization, the second urbanization of the Indian subcontinent in that sense. But this site is changing the whole narrative itself, because what we found is that there are pieces of charcoal There are pieces of iron which have been found within pots, which are dating to 3345 BCE. I will tell you why this 3345 BC is so very, very important. You can say the accreditation, the fact that the iron dates to this period has come from 3 different institutes, one in the US, one in Ahmedabad, the other one in Lucknow, all known for their accuracy. And the method which was again used in Kiladi and here again, AMS. As I told you, it is a C14 dating method which is better in that regard. But they have also used luminescence or thermoluminescence concept, where they are trying to make sure that this site or this date is actually accurate. Based off the Archaeological Survey of India, Tamil Nadu branch, the data, it is very well established that this site has yielded a iron smelting based technology based artifact, which is going to 3345. Now, why is this so important? See, if I talk about, here again we come back to the timeline. If I talk about the timeline of how Indian history moves forward, something which I did in the previous video also, you have Mesolithic, the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. Nobody really challenges this because this is very circumstantial to the evidences which you find, and every book will give you a different date for it. But more or less from 2.5 million years ago till 4000, nobody really says nothing. However, in Indian context, we talk about the IVC and non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures first, then we talk about 2 timelines, South India and North India. In the South Indian timeline, we then have the concept of Megalithic. From Megalithic, it becomes Sangam. From Sangam, it goes to Satavahanas. And from Satavahanas, it ends in ancient India to the Vakatakas. And the dates, this would be more or less 2600 to 1700 BCE as mature phase. Megalithic is considered 2000 to 300 BCE. Sangam, as we already know, is properly established between 300 to 300 BC, which should now be changed to 800 because of Kiladi itself. And thereafter, Satavahanas and Vakatakas from 100 BCE to the period of 600 CE is the area. In the North timeline, what happens is you have Vedic, which is 1500 to 600 BC. The first urbanization is here. Second urbanization now comes in the form of the Mahajanpadas. And this is where all forms of iron were very, very important. 600 to 324. And then 324 or 321 Mauryas. From there we have the post-Mauryan period. And then last is Guptas. Again, something which we discussed previously. But here the 184 to 300 and 300 to 600. Now, if you look at this timeline, you will realize how Kiladi is destroying the narrative itself is going to be a game changer. Because we tend to we talk about iron here. That iron age in India, in North, is Vedic period. Iron age in South India is Megalithic. Maximum we were going to 2000. We were never touching IVC. If I put Sivagalai's date somewhere here, it would be 3343 or 43345 BC, which means that it is before IVC in the southern sector, in peninsular India, in South India, iron technology had independently developed, and that too without knowing about the Hittite, and therefore their technology is not the oldest, it is ours. So if I revise this timeline, it becomes even more interesting, because then I have Paleo, Meso, Neo. However, now my timeline becomes bifurcated from here itself, which is when I have IVC, first urbanization, non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures in North India, and then I have Vedic, then I have Mahajanpadas, and so on and so forth. My timeline of South India tells me that every technology which has been always talked about being inherited from the north was actually there. So here, my Iron Age of South India based on Sivagalai starts in 3345 BCE only. And this is going to be 2600 BCE. And therefore, if I add Kiladi to this whole mix, then I have a whole proper civilization, which I called Megalithic, used to previously called Megalithic. I will call Sangam, because Sangam age then moves to 800 BCE, and till 300 CE, then I have what is called the Indus Valley Civilization. This is the real timeline and the new timeline which needs to be talked about, which nobody is going to talk about, because NCRTs or whatever traditional information we have is based on this one, not this one. So what happens is that based on Sivagalai, I have iron when there is only copper, and therefore maybe, and this could be true also, it is the iron technology which is disseminated from South India, which was taken up from the South Indian sector by the Aryans, that in Vedic age I get iron. So therefore Iron Age of North is later. Iron Age of South India is first, and then thereafter North India. Again, debunking the whole myth that there's an inheritance concept, or there is a what we call as subservience or a secondary timeline here. So the timeline revised based on Sivagalai and Kiladi becomes that we have Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, IVC, Vedic, Mahajanpada, but we have Iron Age of South India, very well established civilization, which then matures into the Indus Valley Civilization in the form of Kiladi, and thereafter we go into two separate timelines, Megalithic, Sangam, and thereafter Sangam ends by the period of 300 CE, and then we have the Satavahanas and the Vakatakas. Very interesting development in that regard. What the report is arguing is, in a very subtle manner, this. The broader conclusion of the report, based on which we are having this discussion, says, when cultural zones located in north of Vindhyas experienced the Copper Age, the region south of the Vindhyas might have entered into iron due to limited availability of exploitable copper ore. This is again the reason which is being pushed by the report which is coming out of South India itself, which is because iron ore is readily available in south than copper, it was but obvious and logical that they would be able to smelt iron first rather than copper. And this is where the Copper Age of North India and the Iron Age of South India are contemporaries. And this is important in the larger concept, because iron is considered to be advanced. Iron is considered to be a game changer. See, because iron smelts at a temperature which is 2 times higher than copper itself, and it is very difficult to identify iron ore, then smelt it and then make it into something. It is very, very critical that we understand what this means. Therefore, anything which has been argued to you through social media, through the concept of what is called as traditional knowledge, Eurocentric British knowledge, colonialistic knowledge, that North is first, South is second, or the concept that there is an inheritance of knowledge from North to South, all of that needs to be debunked. And we need to now create an understanding where I would say that we should follow this timeline, which is that way is more accurate of what actually happened. We have to say that Paleolithic led to Mesolithic, led to Neolithic, and thereafter we have IVC, we have Vedic, we have Mahajanpada, we have Mauryas, we have post-Mauryas, but we have a much more advanced civilization in South India in the form of the Iron Age in South, and thereafter it becomes Sangam, which is 800 BCE based on Kiladi, and thereafter the concept of Satavahanas and then the Vakatakas. This is where we have to not bifurcate at this point, which is after the IVC, but before the IVC, 3343, this date, 3345, 3343 BC based on different sources, disrupts the timeline and argues that the world's first Iron Age was not in Anatolia, but in India, and that too in Tamil Nadu. Very, very significant. It is time that we take cognizance of these things and also start to change our popular imagination and understanding. Within academic spaces, this may have happened, but in popular imagination, it hasn't. I hope that you like this session, you found this informative. And again, in the series of debunking old traditionalist knowledge and old colonialist knowledge, I will keep on coming through with new types of understanding in that regard. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.